May I start by saying how extremely pleased we are with the ruling of the ICJ. The ruling has gone in favor of Guyana, and the ICJ has rejected the objection by Venezuela to the substantive case moving forward. So now that the ICJ has rejected this objection, we can move forward to having the substantive case presented before the ICJ. We welcome all of the bipartisan support that we have received. This matter, as was pointed out by the opposition, has always been the matter of the issue of our border, a national issue, and shouldn't be a cause for division or low-life sniping. And I just want to condemn what I've seen by Valda Lawrence. She just made a post which says, APNU AFC, take a bow, return on the 18 million US signing bonus, as though this outcome of the ICJ is a return on the signing bonus. Now let me quickly tell you about the signing bonus. The signing bonus was provided for, and the government received it. They never informed the country they received it. The Ministry of Finance established an account outside of the consolidated fund and outside of the balance sheet of the central bank, and deposited the signing bonus in that account. When asked about this signing bonus, the Minister of Finance replied, "We never requested nor did we receive a signing bonus," although his ministry had authorized the creation of the account, and he knew that the money was sitting in the account almost a year after he gave that answer. When it came to light, and this was largely because of investigative work by the media and by the political parties in opposition at that time, they refused to transfer the money to the consolidated fund. And as you know, the money was illegally kept outside of the consolidated fund. It's contrary to our financial laws and the Constitution of Guyana. Public money can only be kept in 3 accounts: the consolidated fund, a deposit fund, which has to be created by the Ministry of Finance, but if it's created and money placed in that account, Parliament has to be notified within a particular period as to the creation of the account and the sum of money in the account. And thirdly, money can be placed into accounts that are created by special legislation. So say the Lotto Fund has a special legislation, or GGMC has a special legislation where it can keep some of its revenue outside of the consolidated fund. This money was placed in none of those accounts. We had to go to the court to get them to transfer the money. They then made the false claim that this money was going to be used for the border case. Now, our argument was that if you need 18 million US dollars to pursue our case at the ICJ, the PPP will support that. If you need $100 million, I recall saying this in opposition, 100 million US dollars to present the best case, we will support it. But you did not have to do it in an illegal or surreptitious fashion. You could have placed the money into the consolidated fund and easily say we had to appropriate money for our case to the ICJ, and they would have had our 100% support. So when I see on a day like this, that should be a day that we'd be happy about because we get finally to have our substantive case being heard at the ICJ, and we know about the strength of our case and about the weakness in Venezuela's assertions that the 1899 arbitral award was not valid. So it should have been a day for rejoicing, and all of us should have been happy, but it had to be spoiled by this partisan sniping. Now, we have seen the last week since I spoke here characterized, as we have come to expect, by drama again from the APNU AFC and the Lilliputian leader of that party. So another female general secretary seems to be, from all, we're impartial, the People's Progressive Party is an impartial observer. We did not post any tape of what happened. We were passively viewed a tape where it seems as though the general secretary of that party was shut out of Congress Place. Now, just a week before that, I had spoken about, in Norton's tenure, 2 female general secretaries have been removed or have lost their jobs, and a treasurer. And now Norton seems to want to outdo his really impressive track record of the past. So this week we've had another set of drama. Now, we don't know of the circumstances that led to this, but it's obscene in any case. It's obscene. And what is even more obscene is Mr. Norton giving some wishy-washy explanation as to what is going on. So he needs to be interrogated more on this, because it is an important issue, not because it is not a single incident. It follows a pattern of behavior that we've come to expect from a leader of his nature, a small-minded leader. And therefore, it speaks about a trend in that party, a trend of exclusion, a trend of discrimination, and seemingly racist tendencies from the leader of the opposition. He's been accused by his own members as being racist. Now, I gather there was just another press conference held by our Lilliput, and he took with him, first of all, he said that, and I'm not going to go through everything, but some of the most obvious things. He said that APNU AFC would help people to pay rent if they get into government. That you shouldn't really be owning homes, because the government is building homes that are not too small for people, so you can hear what's going on in the bedroom. Now, how more divorced from reality can you get? For many people across this country historically grew up in modest housing. They always aspire to do better and eventually to build better facilities. the leader of the opposition in the and then President Granger had a very modest house until he became president in a very short period. And there are thousands of Guyanese who started small and then managed to build better facilities. But this is a leader who comes from a party with a track record that since Forbes Burnham died, that they never had a housing program, and led to a massive backlog of people living in very terrible conditions and not having the dignity of ownership, even closing down the Ministry of Housing, and then having the PPP making this one of the most vibrant sectors in our economy. And tens of thousands of Guyanese have now have a home ownership, land ownership, or home ownership because of the policies of the PPP. And as recent as the 2015 to the 2020 period, they did very little to enhance the desire of Guyanese. With that track record, he comes to criticize the PPP about its housing policy. And how visionless can you be if you don't want people to own things, you just want them to rent all their lives? But he sees a virtue in this. Clearly he has nothing to do, and his advisors should tell him to stay away from this issue, because it can't win his party any sympathy in the Guyanese populace at large, among supporters of both parties, except for the unthinking among our midst. So that's one issue that he spoke on. And then he spoke again on local government elections at the recently concluded press conference. He said they are preparing across the country for local government elections, but they're not sure they will contest as yet. Now we are, because they want a number of things addressed, but he hasn't named what he wants addressed. So we are about just over a week from submitting our list of nominees for the various local government bodies. And the major opposition party in the country has not made a decision whether it will contest or not, but it's preparing. And it wants a number of issues, phantom issues, addressed, because it hasn't said what it wants addressed. This is the state of confusion that that party is in at this point in time. So now what I'm fearful of, though, is that given what I said before, that they are finding it very hard not only come up with a list of candidates in many NDCs across Guyana, but they're also having a hard time finding backers for the list, that we'll have a return to what they practiced widely in the 2018 elections, local government elections, where they forged the signatures of many of the backers and misled many of them. In the quarantine course in Wim Bloomfield, NDC, you recall that the AFC fooled a number of people. They told them they were signing up to get house lots. And then the people suddenly saw their list, their names as backers for the list in the Wim Bloomfield area. But this was not unique to the Wim Bloomfield NDC. In many other areas, they forged the signatures of the backers. So we have to be very vigilant that this will not repeat itself, because they're having a difficult time. Nevertheless, I think the country and his supporters and his candidates must be confused too. Because here they're saying they're signing up statutory forms, maybe, or signing up backers forms, and why are they doing it if they don't know whether they're contesting as yet? This is really not just confusing to the country at large, but must be even more confusing to the people of Guyana. And then Mr. Norton had to venture into the Marriott issue. So last week when we spoke about the Marriott issue, I explained the reason why we're putting Marriott, selling Marriott at this point in time. And people can agree or disagree with that. We believe we can maximize the revenue to the Treasury, and ultimately ownership of a hotel does not allow a government to pursue its strategic goal, which is to create employment for people generally, to have a world-class health care and good quality education, to extend housing and expand housing facilities available. We believe those are the core functions of government, security, etc. Once there are gaps, once you have the business community being able to fill the gap in some of the areas, the investment gap, the government doesn't need to be there except to stimulate new investments. So that's the philosophy. And we can demonstrate why we pursue that philosophy, but it's all to maximize value. Mr. Norton says that a proper assessment must be done of the decision, but the Marriott is profitable by chance. Now, I have to return to what I said about all of the other facilities, because as I pointed out last week, many are considered controversial. But there's nothing that happens by chance. When we have carefully laid out plans, we fill gaps, we fill needs based on our vision and based on our assessment of the future. We don't operate on a day-to-day basis and say, whatever happens tomorrow, we'll deal with it tomorrow. We start planning for it today. And that is why we saw the need for stable electricity, and we are tackling it definitively. We see the need for cheaper electricity, we're tackling it definitively by that project. In the 5 years of APNU, they didn't tackle electricity supply definitively or the cost of electricity. We see the need for expanded health care, and we're building 12 new hospitals, and we're starting to improve services. Just this week, the President convened a meeting. We found out that there is a huge backlog because one of the equipment was damaged in the fire at the Georgetown Hospital. We had about 3,000 people needing echocardiogram, and we can't deliver it in the government. So we brought all the private sector operators, and we decided for a fee, they will now clear the backlog within 3 months, and 3,000 people who are waiting will get that service, and another 2,000 who are waiting for ultrasound, and whilst we're buying some new equipment. So we're tackling these problems because with a plan in mind, almost every single thing. It doesn't happen by chance, Mr. Norton. We don't live for today. You can't run a country by operating only for today. And so those were the major cases. He believes that Ogunse didn't say anything to warrant charge under the Racial Hostility Act. He doesn't see anything wrong with that. When any Guyanese impartial person would think that he should have been charged for much more than just under the Racial Hostility Act. But of course, since he shared the platform, and as I said before, that the most outrageous things would be left to the WPA and to the other organizations to carry. The racist campaign that they can't openly carry now, the PNC, because they're under scrutiny. And for the first time in this country, people are examining the party in great detail, dissecting it. And every section that they dissect, they're finding a racist DNA there. So that is what's happening there. That's why they're changing the tactic a bit. And so the WPA is going to continue carrying the racist message, and they would seem holier than thou. Now he took along with him someone, and he could get better economic advice from this guy, some Low. Now, Low is mediocre at best. I've looked at it. I don't read much about the guy, because I read once the first couple of articles and then I make my assessment, and after that you disappear from my vision. But I know a few things about Low. That he was supposed to appear on a program with Joel Bagwedin, and he developed a case of diarrhea the very night. Couldn't show up on the program because Low comes out with some of the most outrageous things, and are not even technically sound. And can you imagine if Norton is relying on this guy for economic advice? What's going on in that camp? He had to resurrect. We also saw Hamilton Green for advice. Hamilton Green is a relic from prehistoric times, and he resurrected him, and now he brought this Low. So the Low said the government would have never done the audit had it not for PNC pressure. So the audit that we're talking about was contracted by the PNC. The first audit that was done, that is in the news now, was contracted by the PNC. He didn't even know that. He said, we wouldn't have done the audit if they didn't PNC didn't pressure us to do the audit. So apparently he doesn't know that. The second audit, we made it clear why we wanted local content, and the second audit has been done, and the preliminary work is completed now, and it has to go through all of that. So that's the first thing. The guy doesn't know this. So I think he's piggybacking. They look at the media, they have no original thought. So they're looking at the media and saying maybe what's surfacing in the media that we can jump on now. So Starbuck News has brought up the question of the IHS market report, and whilst they have a right to question everything, one characterization that they've had where they said the government has kept this secret is patently false. Because I had to point out when I gave a comment at the local content summit that this is not a policy-making issue. The policy-making issue was to get the audit completed. This is a purely technical matter, and I believe on one hand they want the policymakers, they say you micromanage, and then the other hand, you must get down to deal with all the technical issues. So the reason why it's not secret, for example, what was secret was the PSA. They had to file a number of things on the PSA in the registry. The PSA, they didn't do that. They kept it out of the registry. It was the PSA, the signed one was kept under lock and key. The technical agencies did not receive the PSA. None of them had it. The staff of the ministries and the GRA, they didn't have their production sharing agreement. It was a decision of the policymakers to keep the PSA secret. So they deliberately kept it under lock and key. This audit was done, And the criticism about the length of time that it took is fair. It's a fair criticism. It is, but this audit has been available between the GRA and the Ministry of Natural Resources to a minimum of 20 technical staff for the last 2 years. They've had this audit. So it's not secret. It's in GRA, and they have had maybe about 12 to 15 persons who have been looking at this audit, and the same thing in the ministry. So over 20 technical staff had copies of the audit and looking at it. So it's no secret document or from the policymakers not to keep it, not to make it available in the public as what happened with the PSA. That's one. That's the first key point. So we don't accept that it's secret. It's available to the technical staff at the places. The slot in addressing the concerns is accurate. It's going too slowly, but we're not going to lose, as Elson Lowe says, billions of dollars. The reason you can't lose billions of dollars because the audit itself says that there are about $200 million of, I have it written here. So the audit says it's about $200 million of expenditure that is being challenged. Okay, so it can't be billions of dollars. You can't lose it because it's been identified as potentially a source that if Exxon can't give proper explanations, will go back into, will be removed from the cost bank and go into the profit part of the sharing. It's not money that you will lose. It's just that the country will recover it. That is the purpose of an audit. Now, one thing I want to caution though, that I saw in the Stabroek News article, it says it's a whopping 12.8% of the 1.67 billion of expenses could be disputed. A whopping 12.8% of or $214 million. But the article goes on to categorize how these $214 million were identified. So it says defined cost for removal is $34 million. That is what the audit said has to be removed from the cost bank into the profit share of oil. 34 of the 214 million. Inadequate supporting document, 179.8, 180 million of the 214. They said inadequate supporting documents, so they're waiting for additional documents from Exxon to support that expenditure. So if they can't, then that goes into cost oil. But if they can substantiate it with additional supporting documents, then it doesn't get removed. And then for ministerial approval required, it's just about $270,000. So really, 180 million of the $214 million is yet Exxon has to provide additional documentation for. So let us be clear about this, because when somebody says why wasn't in the future, that is why if you make the audits public like that at the beginning, right at the beginning, and when it's a management letter, which is a standard practice, then you don't give the other side a chance to respond or to cure it, to say you have not submitted in the audit enough documents. You better give us more documents, or if we can't do that, then we'll remove the expenditure. So that process is taking too long, but we're not losing a cent of it. So with this Lowe saying billions of dollars, we're not losing billions of dollars. It's just that it is not secret. That's one. What was secret was how ACNU dealt with the PSA. This is not secret. This was available to over 20 technical people for 2 years. It's been in the public, as far as I'm concerned, there was no gag order not to speak about it, not to release it. No gag order about it. So I'm now even worried that it's in the public domain because it's a document that has been with the technical staff. And the comment about it taking too long is a fair comment. We as policymakers, we press the technical people too to get this along, get it going, complete the work, because we have a ton of other things to do from the policy making side. We can't be running the technical issues all the time. You hire people to do that. So it's going slowly, but it is getting the required attention at the technical level. What would have been even more distressing is if our GRA or the ministry had just said, all right, we accept it, and let's go forward. Or allow Exxon to get away with some spurious explanation. They're sticking at it. It's taking long, but they're sticking doggedly to it. Doggedly to it, even if it takes a bit long. And we're not going to lose a cent from that. Right? So again, the serious advisor, economic advisor said, did you comment on, the media asked him, on the PSA? And he said, it has not been submitted. At the appropriate time, we release these because we want to present them in a structured manner. Oh God, how can you even say something so stupid to a country? What is structured about your comments? There are various, the PSA was drafted. We know in the old PSA, we had some problems with the old PSA. It's drafted by sections. Just say section 1, these are our comments. Clause 1, these are our comments. Why would it take, up to now, you can't present your comments because you need to do so in a structured way. Do they have any? So they have it in an unstructured way now, and they're taking time now to present it in a structured way. They have no comment. This is, you can see, I don't want to use a bad word here, but you can see nonsense when you hear it. You can identify it. This guy doesn't have a clue about anything in the PSA. And this is the main opposition party in this country. So, on this whole issue of transparency and about clear policy making, we've had the PNC and the AFC that have a track record of hiding things in the sector. They didn't publish the permits, the environmental permits. They did not publish the licenses. We published all of those, the permits, the licenses, and you can now see the difference between those for yourselves, how they have been strengthened. We have, as I said before, we have put in place a new sovereign wealth fund, basically to enhance transparency. It's globally recognized now. The IMF made some extensive comments about how we have a transparent natural resources fund now. We have reformed the fiscal regime. We're working on the PSA. We're changing the law. And a lot of the comments that the IHS Markit identified in the audit about international standards, industry standards that weren't met in terms of the work plan, etc. Those have to be strengthened in the PSA now, the new PSA, and in the Act itself. So the Act defines clearly that these work plans must be submitted, how you address issues of cost overrun, all of these issues because we know what the issues are. So as we improve the framework, we're tackling the issues substantively to ensure that the industry moves closer to international standards, which is a task that we have undertaken. We have passed local content legislation. So for one single moment, we are not going to allow anyone to disparage the large amount of work that the PPP has done on policy making to get this industry up to international standards and to put in place a proper framework. By sniping at little things, little deficiencies. Oh, you didn't check the audit enough. Well, we're checking the audit too, but we're working on a bigger regime that would ensure in the future that we don't get poked in the eye like we were poked in the eyes. So we're not going to allow that to happen. And we have an opposition party that was not only not transparent, didn't put in place this regime, but clearly has no clue about policy making in the sector. When you listen to their chief economic advisor talking a lot of nonsense like he did just today's press conference. And this is not unique to today's press conference. It's almost an everyday occurrence with the APNU. There, on the same issue on transparency, coming back to transparency, we are dealing with a number of things. We want to make sure that at least when an issue is raised in the public domain now, that we respond comprehensively. So that if people can't in the future claim ignorance, and sometimes it's ignorance that leads to some of these articles being written by the media, and we're not disparaging the media for writing these articles. Maybe it's not enough information out here, it hasn't been researched enough, or people pose as media persons or posed as columnists, but they're really politicians. So we've seen a lot of that happening. For example, every week we see the Kachor distorting headlines, and then they use Peeping Tom anonymously. We don't know who the Peeping Tom is. It could be somebody writing for Glenn Lal because it's anonymous, to reinforce the lies in many cases. So that's not journalism as far as I'm concerned. And that has no level of professionalism, and it's a politician at work. So the last time I was here, I said we're selling the Marriott and the proceeds, that there's one shareholder in the Marriott, which is the government of Guyana. I criticized the Kite News for even up to last year saying that there are many secret shareholders in the Marriott. They sold that since 2015, that there were a lot of secret investors in the Marriott. So one would have thought that it could have easily been checked because APNU was there. APNU knew that there's only one shareholder. The reporter went back, and I'm sure that it's not the reporter, but the headline was that I said that the money will be used to pay out the secret investors in the Marriott. We're selling the Marriott to pay the money to the secret investors. That's the headline, you check it. Now, one shareholder, they asked me a question about it, I dealt with it, and that's the headline. So many people reading that would think there were many investors and secret investors too in the Marriott. That's the headline. Then you recall, as I said before, another reporter asking me from the same newspaper, have you taken out insurance for the power plant and the gas facility. Does the government have insurance for that now? And if you haven't taken it out, why haven't you done so for the gas to energy facility, the power plant and the NGL facility? I said no. Most likely that will happen in the future. He asked me, did you build a fire station there? I said, no. We're not out of the ground as yet. So there's nothing to burn down or to insure at this point in time. But I'm sure at the appropriate time, you can't go and insure a building if it's not built as yet. When it's built, then you have to insure. And it's logical, everybody knows this. So she said, what if it explodes? So I said, well, that is what it will happen. The headline was that Jagdeo says that he's hoping that the gas to energy project wouldn't explode. That I said that I hope that the gas to energy project wouldn't explode. The next one we had was, they asked me a question, if I'm worried about losing votes. I think it was Dennis who asked me that, and I said that we're not worried about losing votes. A question was asked to me. But we've seen this, and we've seen this pattern of lies in the Kaichor news. And so one wonders whether there's still newspaper or in a political campaign, because they lie. And they get some cowards in peeping Tom. If these are real people, they're cowards. Because someone says, Jagdeo needs a lesson in the economics of solar power. I'm prepared to take the lesson in economics of solar power. But who is the peeping Tom to give me the lesson in economics of solar power? Because after I expose Glenn Lal for what he is, a rabble-rouser, loudmouth, and with no technical skill, and I said that he promised on the air to bring up a PPA to us for a few cents to buy solar power, and I made the same offer to Bulai. If you're so convinced about the economics, we can buy the power at with a PSA, 24 hours solar power. They dug in instead of recognizing that it can be done. So they want to give us a lesson. But I'm prepared to take the lesson, and a public lesson, where I can get to ask questions. If the peeping Tom would have the courage to come forward, the same peeping, the anonymous peeping Tom. So the same thing with guest editorials. I think newspapers should, I've seen the major newspapers around the world, for transparency's sake, they would put who the guest editor is. And many newspapers here don't do that. So you can go and say whatever you want, but you don't have to be held accountable. And I think people should be held accountable. I would like to see the guest editors, who they are and what views they express, because people can freely express views in the country. So it's a practice I think we should encourage. But talking about the editorials, I wanted to come back to one editorial that picked up on the same thing about how intolerant we are about transparency and accountability, or duplicitous. I'm not going to go through the entire editorial. And it dealt with the Public Accounts Committee. It was an editorial in the Starbuck News. I don't know if it's a guest editorial, the 26th of March. And Gail Tischer responded to that editorial. So, and she quoted a section of the editorial. So I want to read the section of the editorial, and then I want to tell you about, just briefly, about the fact. So it says, the refusal on the part of the PPPC to facilitate the investigation of government accounts under its own stewardship, as opposed to the period when the other side was in office, is more than a refusal to afford the opposition a potential avenue for criticism. It is to renege on a constitutional duty to the nation. And the nation includes the PPPC's own supporters, not just those of APNU, AFC, and the independent voters. In other words, the PPPC is behaving as if it is not accountable to anyone and is entitled to do as it pleases. Whatever else this is, it is not in correspondence with a standard definition of democratic behavior. So it is saying the refusal on the part of the PPPC to facilitate the investigation of government accounts under its own stewardship, meaning now, as opposed to the period when the other side was in office, which is from 2015 to 2020. Now, it goes on to complain that too few meetings of the Public Accounts Committee and they're canceled. So let's address, Gail Tischer address this issue, the first issue about number of meetings of the Public Accounts Committee. She pointed out in the 10th Parliament, that is the period under Ramatar, that 32 months, in a 32 months period, 57 meetings were held. In the 11th Parliament of the PSC, in a 40-month period, 44 meetings were held. This was under Granger, 44 meetings. And in the 12th Parliament, this is the current one, in 28 months, 51 meetings were held of the PAC. So more meetings of the PAC in the 28 months in this government than were held in the 40 months on the APNU AFC. They only had 44 meetings versus 51 now. So it's a fallacy that we're slowing down the work, that less meetings are held based on the numbers now. So she did a physical count. That's the fact. You can't dispute that. So the editorial was factually inaccurate. Factually inaccurate. That's one. Because it seems as though there's a pattern here. The second thing is that until now, the Public Accounts Committee is dealing with the APNU years. So they're now at 2019. So this point about the PPP, the refusal on the part of the PPPC to facilitate the investigation of government accounts under its own stewardship as opposed to the period when the other side was in office. We haven't even gotten to those years, the PPP years, the 2020 year as yet, when we're in office. We're only going through public accounts from the 2015 to the 2020 period. So this can't be true too, that we're refusing to have investigations in the period we've been in office because we don't want, and this is undemocratic behavior and it's not transparent. It's wrong. It's a lie. It's not true. We're still in APNU years. Now, clearly somebody was trying to influence the editorial or talking about this, because the question should have been why is it that APNU AFC wants to rush through their years, the 2015 to the 2020 period? Why is it that should have been the converse question should have been asked? Why is it that they want to rush through? And Figueroa and the others want to sweep everything through. They want to go through a whole section of the accounts in a single day. They just want all meetings to ramrod the whole account so that we can't, as a country, have detailed scrutiny of the 2015 to the 2020 period. So this editorial should have been about APNU, not about the PPP. It's totally false. But when something like this gets in the public domain and it seems factual with all the judgment, not just the facts, You know, you can do a recital and accuse us of this, but it's almost very, it's a very judgmental editorial talking about that exhibit neither accountability nor transparency, and so that their insistence that they adhere to both only reinforces an image of hypocrisy, as though we are hypocrites. We're not hypocrites. If anybody is a hypocrite, it's the other side. And so I've demonstrated two things here today. That we've had more meetings of the Public Accounts Committee under the shorter period in this government than in the last government. So it couldn't be that, as the opposition is complaining, that we're stymieing the work of the PAC. That's one. So that's very important. And secondly, we can't be refusing the investigations of our years in office, because we haven't even gotten to those years in office. The public accounts have not started scrutinizing those years in office. The audited statements have been submitted, but we're only dealing with the APNU years. So we cannot let these things stand, because if they stand, then they just reinforce headlines that are very, very misleading, and they go to a pattern of behavior where it gets picked up upon, and then the opposition is just waiting to pounce on that. They plant the seed, the lies, they get the lies reflected in the media, and then they pounce back on it and say, look what we're saying. It's like self-reinforcing. I'm not going to go through. There are lots of other things that I have here that I wanted to talk about. The headlines. Again, I spoke at the local. I saw the Kaichor News headline. Jagdeo vows to fast track the oil and gas sector for 15 years and has no shame about it. Now, I gave a detailed explanation as to why we need to keep economic activities high and momentum going in the industry for the next 15 years at a minimum, because we're encouraging a lot of Guyanese to invest in the sector. We are doing a lot of carve-out. Got some good music out here. This is outside of Freedom House. So we're doing that largely because we want that the Guyanese who we're encouraging to invest in transportation sector and in housing and security services and catering services to supply the industry and to build capacity through higher education and training. We don't want their investments or their skills to be stranded, because if the momentum dies, you saw what happened in Ghana. If the momentum dies, all of those people can't amortize their investments, and they would be stranded. They may be owing the bank and stuff like that. So we want more business to come to our people, and we also want them to do well in the future. We explained that 100 times. We have explained the quote, the World Bank Group encourages government to invest in zero-emission infrastructure. But the entire developed world is putting in infrastructure that is polluting. But we in Guyana and Suriname and Africa, we're the only ones must put in zero-emission infrastructure. Nonsense again. I'm not going to go through all of these headlines that come up in the newspapers. Maybe one day I'll just sit down and show you how nonsensical they are. But for today, I'd end here. Thank you very much. I just believe that we need to keep the focus. Let me make it clear again. We will support the media as in questions and exposing issues, bringing them to light. We want to deal with them in a manner that is fact-based, that is fair to everyone. If, as I said before, like the sleuth in the audit is a concern, not just of the media, it's a concern of policymakers too. But we can't divorce ourselves from the major advances this country has made and from the progress that has been engendered by the PPP returning to office. So much so that at one stage we were told we are moving too fast. We're doing things too fast. Well, we believe that we are placed here with a responsibility. We made a commitment to people. We're not going to let anyone in this country divert attention away from the achievements of the government, which have been many in a short period, for their political purposes. And that's all that the opposition does. If you see a little sniping about, oh, the houses are too small, this is happening, oh, they didn't get the PSA done on time, we only have a couple of weeks, that sort of thing. Petty comments, basically. Nothing of substance. Thank you. Yes.
What plans are there by your administration to lobby Latin American countries specifically to convince Venezuela that they should comply politically with the finalization report? And secondly, is there another plan to award severance or consistently for severance to the ad workers who are based here?
What? I didn't get the last one.
Is there another plan to assist with severance to the ad workers who are based here?
Okay, on the last issue with the severance for the LIAT workers, I wouldn't be able to say I'm not following that. I didn't even know that there are workers who from LIAT who have not received their full severance. 5 of them. Oh, so I don't know about it, and I wouldn't want to give an answer now. You should ask maybe Minister Edghill. The sector falls under him. So on the other matter, Dennis, this is an ongoing task. We have, over the several years, been presenting our position. We believe it's a just position. We believe that the arbitral award was the final decision, and we have made this case not just in Latin America and the Caribbean, but everywhere else. At the Commonwealth, I told you that in 1999, when I was president, we managed to get a CMAG established. That's a Ministerial Action Group, and to look at this issue, set up in the Commonwealth, and we had the Commonwealth issue in their communique, a supporting statement on this issue, or the controversy, the Venezuela-Guyana border controversy. So historically, Guyana has always lobbied to ensure people understand our position, and it transcends administrations. And that is an ongoing task. So it's not like an event for us. It's an ongoing task. And we have had success. We have had public declarations from major countries in the region. Brazil, for one, said that as far as they're concerned, the borders are fixed. A country like Brazil saying that, and several administrations in Brazil. So in Latin America, we have had successes too. Yes, but I'm telling you that because of the size of we have contiguous borders with Brazil and Venezuela. So any adjustment of, say, the border will have an impact too on Brazil. And therefore, they made a definitive statement and position. They took a definitive statement. So we will continue the lobbying work, but it's an ongoing thing. And we have a great team. that is representing us, and we believe the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is in capable hands. Yes, please. Good afternoon.
You spoke about your efforts in, so to speak, improving the regulation framework for the oil industry. You had promised that you will overhaul the Petroleum Act by March this year. Can you perhaps say where we're at with that process? And what changes can we expect?
Yeah, so the draft is, we have identified all the issues. So we had an issues paper where we looked at several areas that needed strengthening. So we worked at that. We've given a feedback to the drafters. They're working on that. So I expect very soon, I can't tell you exact date, but very soon we should see the draft being made public for consultations. Yes.
You mentioned the development and preparation of this. Can you say if there's
Yeah. I just started a meeting at the executive of the party, and I left and came across here. So yes, we're in the process of, we're practically completed in every area except one NDC, where I have to go down on the ground and personally meet people, because there are lots of candidates that want to contest, and we have to narrow it down to a limited amount. So, and I can only do that on the ground. But except for that one area, I think we have finalized our list for all of the areas across the country. No, I don't want to say that, no. All right.
how to respond to candidates announcing themselves as contending on the
You heard about what I said the last time. So my position has not changed. It is only now that we are going through the formal approval process. So by Tuesday, I'll complete that, all of the approval process. But people have started, we are already getting our backers signing up, because we know that would be necessary. And people have been given statutory forms so to sign up. But then once we have final approval by Tuesday, we would urge the candidates not to, some people get very excited about it and they want to jump the gun. And therefore, I will urge all of them to wait the submission of the candidates to GCOM, and then the campaign can start. So a number of people, I think we have a lot of business people who are supporting us. A lot of them don't have time. And we made it clear too that if you don't have the time to serve, don't put your name down on a list of candidates and then you wouldn't show up to the meetings if you become a councillor. So we have given strict guidelines. As I said before, the last time we were here, we sent out a circular with 14 criteria that members had to observe in selecting the list. It spoke about balance on gender and ethnic balance and all of that sort of thing. And also we made a provision, as I mentioned the last time, that if you sit on an NDC or you put up your name there, you need to do so with a clear understanding that you will not be able to tender for any civil works or any services within that NDC or municipality. You can do so in other areas, but not in that one. So people who are like contractors and stuff, many of them, when they heard that, they stayed off naturally, but they're still supportive, and people who are they're supportive. Yes.
In light of the elections just coming up, recently there have been information that Glenn Lyle has been going on behalf of in party meetings on behalf of PNC. This happened in Corby's, this happened in Essequibo. I don't know if you have received the information, but will the PPP be treating Kaichonis and Glenal as a road news entity still or a political foe?
Let's see. So far, I don't want to. A lot of the reporters are, when they come here, they're just doing their job. And I don't want to make it uncomfortable for the reporters. But they must by now, they're smart people to know that they're working for a political entity, not so much a newspaper. So they would have to make that judgment themselves. We will have to answer the questions. We'll be critical of the newspaper too and its lies, but we'll still answer questions until that changes. What you've been saying is, accurate. That there are a lot of the dregs from the AFC and the others, that the AFC is practically defunct, dead on the ground, and you have some of the PPP haters in some areas, like a few of them who've all often had trouble on the ground because they want to steal someone's land or something of that sort, and we came down heavily on them. So some of them hate us pathologically with a passion. So they know they don't have a political force to gravitate to. So Glenlal is now utilizing some of those people on the ground with his a group from abroad, a very corrupt group that is abroad that was trying to get into the oil and gas industry, falsified a lot of their accounts and a whole range of stuff. So they're the ones who are working with him. And then all of these so-called bottom house meetings that he's been doing, I've seen a couple of them. And it's the same. I can identify who the people are when they send me the pictures. So one is, like the last one was held by a man named Subnat in Berbice. Subnat was a PNC MP. So his son arranged a meeting for Glenlal and his place. It's the same old PNC. And so I have no doubt that it might be a open collaboration, because I know Glenlal is very close to the AFC, but it might be an open collaboration with the APNU or a encouragement from the APNU, knowing that the AFC and the others are defunct. And you recall what David Hines said, that the sole purpose of Nagamotu and Ramjatan was to bring some Indian votes in. They had no other use in the coalition. So PNC needs to look for new faces to do that, because Ramjatan and Nagamotu, I don't know when Ramjatan is sober. And I think he gave Norton some of the technical assistance. Norton was talking about my marriage too. You know, Ramjatan likes to talk about my marriage, and so Norton was talking about it. He's giving good technical assistance to Norton, because I exposed him about his brother, the refusal to acknowledge his brother. Anyhow, that's an aside. So I was saying that. But I see Ramjatan is a dodo and now has no credibility on the ground. And so they need Glenlal's and the likes of Glenlal to go and mislead people again on the ground that the PPP is not looking out for them. Oh, the fish ran away from the fishermen, Glenlal was saying. So they told me that the sea bob catch doubled recently. So all the sea bob that swam away now been swimming back to Guyana, coming back here. Because he said the oil and gas industry drove away the sea bob. So that sort of nonsense they carry on the ground. And they say that it is the same kind of hope that people will be gullible again and fall for the $8,000 per bag of paddy and the 20% increase to the sugar workers. So the new set of promises to the fishermen, oh, we'll take care of everything for you, you'll get all the help in the world. Just the messengers have been changing. So Glenn Lal, I believe, is one of those messengers, but they would play him and use him, and then lose him, as they did with Nagamutu and Ramjata.
Dr. Jagdeo,
Yeah.
question. Recently, the president held a press conference, and just after that press conference, again, a press association made claims that the reporters being intimidated. Can you speak to that? Is it deliberate? Is it accidental?
I asked the president about it, and he said to me, it's absolutely nothing of the sort. Absolutely nothing of the sort. But one should look at the person who brought that out. Nazima Raghubir has been very selective. I was surprised when she came to my first press conference here and asked me about the party congress. And so in that press release that was issued about us intimidating reporters, and she mentioned about me criticizing Stabroek News too. Now, I'm not saying Stabroek News has no right to write what they're writing. I'm just saying we have a different view, and I'm speaking about our view. We're a political party. We have to defend our positions. I'm not running down the reporters or the editors of Stabroek News, but she mentioned that in passing as if to add credence to her story. And then she said, in an unrelated way, that the PPP is not holding its Congress, and the Press Association has been hounded for holding its annual, I don't know what they call it, the annual general meeting, because apparently she has not held hers. So then I realized why she came here and asked me that question. But what I may have not said to her, that our Constitution provides for it, and we have a decision of our executive and central committee to postpone in that period the Congress. So it was agreed by the party. I don't think the same can be said about the Press Association. So she's trying to link her own trouble and controversy with that of the PPP. We're not in the business of intimidating reporters. We're not in the business. But as I said before, we will robustly defend. If you come to a meeting with a preconceived agenda and ask some things that are outrageous, don't we have the right to respond? If you come to a meeting and then put in a press conference, and then the next time and go back and put in your newspaper and headline it that I said something which I didn't say, in the country agree that I didn't say it or know that I didn't say it, that we're going to sell the Marriott to pay secret investors. How we have to defend ourselves on these matters. So she wants to make it an issue of press freedom. But I find it very, very selective, and I shouldn't have. I don't expect better coming from her. From over the years, she has been patently supportive of APNU, patently, and that's her right as a reporter, but not to try to twist everything that the PPP say or does. So that's her right. She can come here and ask whatever she wishes. It's a free country, and we have free press conferences, and nobody will intimidate her or any reporter. We have no interest in that. That's not the PPP. Yes, please.
The sale of the Marriott, since the announcement of putting it up for sale, has there been any interest generated in it, or is there a time frame in which
Okay,
government.
as I said before when I answered that question last week to Marcel, that they're now, they had the expressions of interest and now the price proposals have to come in. And once that comes in, at that stage, we probably know what all the prices are that we've received. So, assuming, I'm just saying, is assuming if you're not comfortable that we don't believe that the price is a price that reflects the valuable nature of the property. We are under no obligation to proceed with it, but we're not at that stage as yet. But can you imagine at the press conference today that they mention Norton and Lowe mention Marriott, and they talk about an audit, the audit IHS market audit that is being done on the oil and gas revenue, and they didn't have the decency to even say that from 2015 to 2020, no audit was done for the Marriott. The entire period under APNU, they had no audit for the Marriott. And they spoke about the Marriott today. And they had lots of fancy words to say about, oh, it happened by chance and all of that nonsense. But they didn't say one thing. This is the party of transparency that is concerned that the audit that they commissioned and we're pursuing, and that now we've commissioned a second audit for the additional expenditure. And if you look at the periods we've been in government, we've always had audits done. We've restored accountability to this country. And that's the party that I need to return to this, that in the past, in the 5 years when they're in office, 3 of those years, no politician has had to submit how much they earn, what they own, how much they expended. No politician, because they deliberately killed it. And they didn't want to have a base year so that they can't assess the accumulation in that period can't be assessed against a base year. It was a clever strategy because they did it for the first 3 years. So when you can't establish a base year, when you come into office, normally the base year is there. So when you leave office, you can see, was there unexplained wealth accumulation in this period? So if you don't establish the base year, how do you assess the wealth accumulation in the period? And that's the only 3 years in the past 23 years in Guyana that they didn't have to submit. And nobody speaks about that. Nobody asks Norton about these. Because that's their track record. Or Katius or Ramjatan or the finance and all of that. Every day they're in the media. Thank you very much.